You a fan of Valorant? Let me know. Thank you so much for listening. If you've made it this far, you can always email questions or comments to nocreditsrolled@gmail.com. Call in and leave us a voicemail. We do have a phone line, 856-209-0713. We might just play it on the air. Make sure to subscribe to No Credits Rolled on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcast. And if you're feeling generous, you can check out the Patreon. Just search No Credits Rolled. We've got different tiers that you can subscribe to there, where you can tell me when I should be playing. Anyway, that's all I got. I'll see you next time on No Credits Rolled.
No Credits Rolled.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of No Credits Rolled. My name is Sam Whalen. I'm your host today, and every day. How about that? Before we get started, I want to remind everyone that the fine folks over at Philly Drinkers have partnered with the show to provide you with awesome Philadelphia sports merch for all your favorite teams. Make sure to use the link in the description to shop their collection, and every purchase you make helps out the show. Today's show is going to be a little bit shorter. I wasn't even going to do an episode this week, but there's just too many games to talk about, folks. So I decided to get on the mic and just give my thoughts on a couple of games that I've been playing lately. And that's pretty much what we're going to cover today. There's not going to be a whole lot of news. I did try to include a news story to go with each of these reviews, just to keep some element of the news in there. But it's mostly going to be reviews. It's going to be me yapping for however long I want to go, talking about 2 games that I've been playing in the last week or so. Also, before we get started, I want to remind everyone to go ahead and leave a like on the show, leave a review, leave 5 stars wherever you can, wherever you subscribe. Every little bit helps. Every little bit of traction we get helps the show get out there and to get more people listening. That's really what I appreciate. If you've been a listener since the beginning, I really appreciate you too. Anything you do to help support the show, whether it's listening or commenting or subscribing or liking, every little bit helps, and I appreciate each and every one of you. That's enough of me wasting your time. Let's get into the reviews. First game I want to talk about today is XDefiant. You might have seen it. It's kind of making the rounds. It's the new free-to-play shooter from Ubisoft. It is a arena-based shooter, and the story I have to go with it is that Ubisoft is working to fix XDefiant's busted hit registration, which I will talk about in a second. But first, just a general overview of the game. I've been describing this as the Ubisoft Cinematic Universe, even though it's not movies. It's just kind of like their version of the MCU. So it's a free-to-play first-person shooter developed by Ubisoft San Francisco, which is known for Rocksmith, which was the guitar teaching game that I tried to play and was really bad at, and also South Park, The Fractured But Whole. Now, for all, you don't have to cover your ears. It's 2 different words, Butwhole. It's 2 different words, folks. I don't want to get censored or anything. So they're known for those games, but now they're coming out with XDefiant. My friends and I are debating if it should be called Cross-Defiant or X-Defiant. I like X-Defiant, so we're going to go with that. This game combines the worlds of The Division, Splinter Cell, Ghost Recon, Watch Dogs 2 specifically, and Far Cry 6 specifically into a first-person shooter. It's kind of funny when you hover over these different factions when you go to pick your characters. They're very clear about what games they're pulling from here. They get a little broad with things like Splinter Cell, but with Far Cry, it's definitely Far Cry 6, and it's definitely Watch Dogs 2, and they really want you to know that. And again, it is a first-person shooter. So basically what you're doing in this game, right, you're shooting, you're picking your faction. There are, 5 different factions. You don't have the Watch Dogs faction unlocked currently at the start. I believe you have to earn about 7,000 XP, which is a lot to unlock them. But each faction comes with their own abilities, their own perks, their own benefits, but the guns are shared in between each faction. So, for example, the Rainbow Six, they're not in the game yet, but they will be when the official first season starts. Currently, we're just in the preseason. But, for example, the Division class, you're kind of like these bad guy firefighters, so you deal incendiary damage as your passive ability when you shoot, and you have access to a flame drone that you can send out that blows up and lights everything on fire. Or the alternate ability you can choose is sort of a Molotov that you throw at your feet and blow everything up. The Ghost Recon class, they have more health for some reason. The Far Cry class, they kind of passively heal when they're in a group because they're supposed to be like revolutionaries. and so on and so forth. So you're getting a little bit of that hero shooter aspect. Hero shooter, arena shooter, each one or the other. And you're kind of meshing these abilities. And currently in this preseason, there are really only objective-based modes. So there's like a payload mode, and there is a capture-the-point domination sort of mode. And I've been having a lot of fun with it. My friends and I have been playing it. I'm a sucker for any new free-to-play game that will come out that might be terrible. But I would say XDefiant definitely isn't terrible. It definitely has its flaws in its current phase, but like I said, it is a preseason, and hopefully they're going to work out a lot of these kinks once the full thing releases in Season 1. I definitely think the game has a lot of potential. With that backing of Ubisoft, if they really want to do this, if they really want to commit to this game being their free-to-play shooter, their free-to-play arena shooter that they're going to update and add things like cosmetics to, their live service. We've talked about live service games on this show before. If this is how Ubisoft is going to really try to, compete with things like Call of Duty, then I think it's a good start. It's definitely a good start, but there are things they need to work on. So the gameplay is very fast-paced, right? The time to kill is pretty short. There have been matches where I'm spawning and dying instantly because of poor spawns, which I'll get to in a second. The majority of the game modes, like I said, are objective-based. There is no straight TDM or anything like that, but I'm guessing those will probably be added once that first season fully launches. In terms of the guns are a little iffy, right? The guns feel I would say they feel a little cheap. I'd say they feel okay overall. With some of the ones I've unlocked, definitely feeling better than others. The LMGs are my favorite weapon so far, but in any kind of first-person shooter, I tend to gravitate towards the LMG. It's just my preferred weapon in most games. So that's what I started using when I first started playing this game, because I found the assault rifles and the SMGs they just don't do enough damage, in my opinion, at least the ones you start with. But the LMGs, I think, are pretty consistently good. They do enough damage, they pack enough punch, and right now I'm using the second one I've unlocked is the RPK, and it's pretty great. I know there are people that play on PC that like the SMGs because they can get those headshots. I'm just not that good, so I'm going with the LMG. I'm no shooter expert by any means. I want to make that clear. I always try to give these kind of caveats whenever I talk about games like this. I'm not the expert. I've played a lot of shooters. I've been, one of the first games I played when I first touched a controller was Halo, but I don't know like the pro strats and things like that. I just like to play these kind of games. So take what I say with a grain of salt. As far as the maps go, I think it's one of the standouts of the game. I really like the map design. There's one map in particular that I think is really cool, the Coney Island map. It's like, Coney Island, like a big carnival. But it's a payload map in that instance. And there's a lot of different phases to it where you're going through like a big haunted house or there's like a pirate section, there's like a Egypt section. It's really neat. And it kind of reminds me of Overwatch, where those maps have so much character and life to them, and there's so many things you can pick out and notice. And I think a lot of these maps do that as well in XDefiant. And they're also from Ubisoft games. They're taken from various locations from the different games that are represented in the factions. So a lot of them are from The Division, because The Division takes place in New York and Washington, D.C., so they can just take, any section of it and call it a map. I think visually it looks pretty great. Graphically, it's pretty great. It's a very bright game. I don't know the right term for that, maybe saturation or something, but the colors really pop, I think. And those Division maps, for me, are most recognizable from the little bit I've played of The Division. It's a very specific audience to cater to, but I found it neat. I'm like, oh, hey, this looks like The Division, and it's cool to see those things in first person versus in the Division, you're usually in third person. So seeing these kind of similar map designs from that game in this new environment is pretty neat, I think. And, I'm easy to please when it comes to things like that. So like I've been saying throughout this review, the game is still in its early phases, and there's a lot of issues that will probably be fixed with patches. Like I said at the top of this story, Ubisoft is working on the hit detection in particular. And yeah, the hit registration is pretty bad. You get killed around corners almost constantly. It's definitely my biggest gripe with the game. You feel like you're in cover, you feel like you're behind a wall or behind some piece of cover, and you still die. I mean, there have been times where I round the corner, I turn around, and I see the bullets that are hitting me just clipping right through the wall. Not because of bullet penetration, but literally because of the hit detection and how the bullets are coming at me. It's extremely frustrating, I'll be honest. And it's also when you're shooting an enemy. There is a quote here from, a quote from our most reputable sources here on the internet. a user by the name of bloody_psycho666. I'm sure they are the premier journalists when it comes to these things. But they said, quote, the M16 feels like I'm shooting hopes and dreams at the enemies, which, as someone that likes to unlock the M16 in any of these shooters, I feel so vindicated seeing that quote, because just yesterday at the time of recording, I had unlocked the M16 and I was using it with my pal Joe, who's been on the show. And there were so many instances where I'm pointing directly at the enemy firing and my bullets are just not hitting them. It feels like I'm every third burst I fire is just not real. So to see that gun get specifically called out makes a lot of sense and definitely would explain my issues. But aside from just that, there's a Redditor who, again, we're going for the best sources here, primary sources if you've gone to journalism school. Redditor's always a primary source. His name is Chucked Bank for Bo. Called the hit registration, quote, the worst I've seen in a long time. He says, I'm surviving way longer running and jumping around bullets than I would in any other games, cuz, that's C-U-Z, their shots just won't connect. And then he ends with, lol, LOL. So some hard-hitting commentary from Chuck there. But it's true. I mean, I'm joking, obviously, but it is true. When your whole game is a first-person shooter, these are the kind of things you have to nail, or people aren't going to want to play it, because it's the one thing you're doing is shooting. So if that doesn't feel great, if that doesn't feel responsive or accurate, it's going to turn a lot of people off. And it's definitely one of the barriers that my friends and I are dealing with now, is dealing with that kind of technical side of it that, is already kind of impeding our ability to enjoy the game. And that's not to even mention, the people that are extremely sweaty on PC, bunny hopping around corners, sliding, doing insane stuff that you can only do on PC. That combined with the hit detection issues, there are some matches where you're just completely outmatched by both the game itself and by the people that are just objectively better than you. But it is what it is. And another thing, while I'm complaining, I might as well pile it on. The spawn system is pretty tough, right? The spawns can suck sometimes. I've literally spawned on top of enemy players only to instantly die because they're right behind me with a gun to my head. And there's nothing you can really do in that situation. And I've really noticed it in the domination modes where the points might flip, so the spawns flip as well if people are capturing certain areas. There's also a mode, I guess you could call it King of the Hill. I'm blanking on what the name would be, but it's where the point essentially moves around the map and you stand on it to get the points, and then it times out and a new one spawns and you go there. There were matches that I've done where the point spawns where the enemies are spawning, and they just keep it, and then they do that over and over again, and you can't even get a chance to get in there and fight for it because the enemies, you're killing the enemies and they're respawning right where the objective is. So that stuff kind of sucks, and it makes it hard to just kind of have fun in the game, honestly. You do get that dopamine hit, which I love in games like this, where you get a lot of rewards popping up on screen when you're getting these kills. For example, like multi-kills. There is a healing aspect to the game where you can get rewarded for healing teammates, which I enjoy. And, I think the feedback when you do get a kill is pretty satisfying. Enemies do have health bars and things like that you can chip away at, which some people don't really like. I don't really mind it. But I think when you do get those kills, when you do pop off with a multi-kill, I do think it is satisfying. One thing I've pointed out to my friends, there's no music, I don't think, unless I am missing some sort of setting. There's no music during the match. There are sound effects. There are obviously the in-game sound effects, and there are sound effects for respawning and things like that. But there's no music, and I think it's really noticeable. It's really noticeable how quiet it can get without some kind of music. And I'm not asking for music the entire time, but maybe some punctuating music if you're maybe halfway through a match or something. My friends and I have been playing a ton of Rainbow Six Siege, and there is music in that game. Right when a match is about to end, the music will kind of swell and sort of, raise the tension and make it very dramatic. So I think little touches like that would really help too, and sort of flesh out the soundscape of the game. But overall, if you like COD, I would check it out. It's very much like COD. It does feel cheaper than COD. That's the best way I can describe it. It feels a little bit lower budget, a little bit less AAA, and a little bit more cartoony. And I don't mean cartoony as in Overwatch. I mean cartoony in like a COD mobile kind of way, and that sounds bad, but it's not quite that level of like a mobile game. But you know what I mean if you go play it and you compare it to those kind of games. I would definitely check it out if you do enjoy the COD multiplayer, though, especially if you liked Black Ops 3 and 4, because we are working in those arena shooter, hero shooter aspects with the different factions having different abilities, and there being a little bit of synchronization with those abilities if you want to do that. Most people don't. They just want to shoot and turn their brain off. But there is a little bit of potential there for team play. There is a ranked mode. Joe and I did a match of that and got absolutely dominated. But maybe in that mode, it's a 4v4 currently in this. They're doing like a trial run of the ranked mode. But maybe, there's potential there too if you really want to put some time into it. Now, the final thing I want to talk about here with talking about XDefiant is I'm wondering what the staying power of this game will be with my friends and I, because we were a big fan of the finals when it came out. I don't think I ever talked about the finals on this show, but it was another free-to-play shooter, 3v3v3v3, I think. I'm not just a skipping record there. It was a team-based thing with teams of 3. There was some variation depending on the mode you played, but my friends and I were very much into that game for a while. And then eventually it just kind of got stale, right? We just kind of stopped playing it because there wasn't enough new content. The gameplay loop kind of got stale. People were just better than us and were just dominate, especially if they're on PC, because we are on console. And eventually it just kind of faded away. And I'm wondering if that same thing will happen with XDefiant. It kind of needs that sauce to make it stand out and to make us want to come back to it over and over again. Now, it might be something that I personally stick with, that I play on my own and level up, I got to get the battle pass, got to swipe the card, already did. You know how it is. Support the Patreon, by the way. But in terms of something that my friends and I play together, I'm curious if it will have that staying power, either in this preseason or when that full release happens, if they're going to be bringing the content, bringing the maybe weapons or new maps or new factions that get us back in and say, hey, you know what? Let's put Siege on the back burner for today. Let's boot up XDefiant, do a couple rounds, and, kind of have a good time. Only time will tell, folks. And again, it's interesting seeing this with the backing of Ubisoft, right? That budget, the IPs that Ubisoft have. I'm not saying like the Division is like a COD killer or anything, but it is cool seeing these different IPs utilized in one game. And I think there's a lot of potential there, right? I mean, Ubisoft, you've still got Assassin's Creed, you've still got Rainbow Six, which I believe is coming in that first season. Will we see the Rabbids? Will we see the Rabbids in XDefiant? Boy, I hope so. But yeah, only time will tell. But anyway, that's my thoughts on XDefiant. We're going to take a quick little break, and then when we come back, we're going to be talking about my second game today, Starfield. You're listening to No Credits Rolled. And we're back on No Credits Rolled. We just got done talking about XDefiant, and now I want to cover Starfield. Now, I have talked a lot of smack on this game, and this is sort of my moment to sort of make my peace with that, to apologize to all you Starfield fans out there, because with this new update that Bethesda released for their sci-fi RPG, Starfield is officially back in my gaming rotation. When I've got some free time to myself, this is one of the games that I am turning to boot up just to exist in this world. And I've done reviews now on Fallout 76 and Fallout New Vegas, so I'm definitely in that Bethesda mood, that I have that Bethesda itch. And Starfield is really starting to satisfy that in terms of being a modern Bethesda game that I am invested in. And this is all because of the recent update. It dropped in May, probably 2 weeks ago at the time of recording. Now, the headline I have here is that Starfield's May update causes head-scratching new problems, which, hey, if that doesn't sound like Bethesda, I don't know what is. We covered, an episode or 2 episodes ago when they did that Fallout 4 update, and it
completely demolished one of the mods, the biggest mods that were coming out for the game. So, Bethesda is maybe fixing things with a hammer instead of maybe a finer tool that needs to be done. But hey, it got me back in. But yeah, I've talked a lot of trash on this game, and it definitely has its hooks in me now. The biggest thing, honestly, for me, and you can bash me in the comments if you want for this, but the frame rate update really is helping me get back into this game. I am such a sucker, or a stickler, I should say, for that at least 60 frames. I feel like there's no excuse at this point. Everything should be 60 frames, and this update is able to do that. The game can now run 60 frames. I think you're able to choose 40 if you want to go for visuals, or 60 if you want to do full performance. And it's fairly consistent. I'd say 70 I'd say like 80% of the time it is consistently holding 60 frames a second. That being said, when I booted it up for the first time and went back into one of my side quests, and I was like, wow, look how good this looks. Immediately in that side quest, there were massive frame drops. I mean, we're talking down into the 20 frames a second probably, maybe even lower. So that was disappointing. And you do get those frame drops maybe in large city areas when you're first landing or walking in, rather. If there's a lot of effects and things going on screen, if there's a lot of enemies on screen, you do still get those frame drops. But most of the time it is holding 60, which is great. And the game looks fantastic. When it is running at full speed and no issues, the game is really stunning looking. In particular, I think the character models and dialogue can look amazing. There are some characters that look better than others, and sometimes it can border just a little bit on that uncanny valley. But, I mean, when it hits, it looked great. There was one character in particular, I'm blanking on his name. I'm going to talk about him more later, but he's like the old guy in your team. He sort of is he's like a billionaire that's sort of funding your project. He's, the eccentric billionaire character that you've seen in other things, but his facial capture looks great. Like, there was a moment where I was talking to him and he wrapped up a piece of dialogue, and on the last word he said, his eyebrows like scrunched up in a way that a real human's eyebrows would, that you wouldn't even notice in, the real world, because people have all sorts of facial tics. But to see that in the game and to see that reflected in the performance capture was like, it kind of like blew my mind. It looked so realistic that it looked like I was, it looked like a real person. Now, that uncanny valley does kind of come in, especially with eyes. I think the eyes look a little weird at times.